Hey guys, Brutalzoid here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a most brutal motherboard. Well, actually, it is pretty brutal, but what is also the most overkill motherboard ever to be created. This is the Gigabyte Z77X-UP7, and that UP right there, that stands for Ultra Powerful, and I'm actually not going to write that out. Also, what the hell is this color? We need to get rid of that. There. Much better. Everybody knows that red is far more brutal than orange is. Also, this stupid piece of software doesn't want to let me scroll around again. Anyway, the reason why this motherboard gets to be named the most overkill motherboard ever created is because it's for the Z77X, it's for the Z77 chipset. And as you may recall, that chipset is only supports quad-core Intel CPUs. So, this right here, VRM, is completely ridiculous overkill. And the same is true of this thing right here. So then, this... Lost my train of thought there. We should ignore the little puny three-phase memory power. I mean, it is still pretty overkill, but it doesn't even begin to compare to the beast that is the V-Core VRM that I honestly don't know which exact inductors make it up. It's probably something roughly looking like this. Yeah, I'm not sure about how it what happens with it like here. But, still, it's pretty, the issue is that some of these inductors in this area are for the iGPU, and I'm not sure which ones they are because, quite frankly, I couldn't get the multimeter probes in the damn little couldn't get the multimeter probes on them to check. But anyway, what we are looking at here is a 32-phase V-Core VRM, and, something going on there. Well, what's going on there is we also have 3 phases for the iGPU. So, that's pretty insane. And then another +2 for the CPU VTT rail. Now, unfortunately, I don't actually have any experience with the Ivy Bridge CPUs, or Sandy Bridge for that matter. But, that seems to be some kind of memory controller rail. And you know what? That's still got a 2-phase, which, generally speaking, memory controller rails don't need more than one. So, still pretty overkill even by my standards, but that still doesn't even begin to compare to that 32-phase V-Core. So, how does Gigabyte achieve all of these damn phases? Well, that's simple. They use this chip right here, which is called the IR3563A. This right here is an 8-phase high-end digital voltage controller from an international rectifier, and it's basically the predecessor of the IR35201. It goes all the way up to 2 MHz switching frequency, and unlike on most motherboards, here that switching frequency can actually be sometimes used, because this thing achieves its 32 phases by the use of these chips right here, which there are 8 of, because they're quadruplers, and 8 times 4 is 32, so, how else would you get to 32 phases? Anyway, those chips are international rectifier IR3599s. 1 PWM signal goes in, 4 PWM signals come out. Now, I'm not actually going to try, draw them on here, because we do have 3 more, we have 2 more of those chips on this side, and the rest of them is, of course, located on the back of the board, because with a VRM this freaking massive, it didn't fit on the front side. So this is where the rest of the V-Core VRM, as well as potentially part of the iGPU and CPU VTT VRM, are located. But I'm not really sure, again, which ones are which, because quite frankly, probing all of this is a lot of work, and not really that interesting to do. Anyway, but, you might be thinking, okay, so it's got 32 phases. Surely they couldn't have. Nope, they did. They did. They used IR35, 50, 60 amp power stages. It literally does not get more overkill than this. you're like, what you gonna put on this? A 2600K? A 3770K? A puny little quad core? You really think you need a 60 amp power stage? You don't. But this board is far too brutal to go with anything less than the best. And at the time that these were relevant, because you can't really buy them anymore, they've been replaced by the 3555 pretty much. But when these were relevant, this was pretty much the best you could go for. And, going back to that 2 megahertz switching frequency, well, they don't support 2 megahertz switching frequency. That's kind of the reason we got the later power stages. They support higher switching frequencies. However, the 3550 does still work just fine all the way up to 500 kilohertz, and the 3599, being a quadrupler, only cuts this switching frequency to 1/4 per phase. That means you can actually max out the voltage controller on one of these motherboards, which is well, that's pretty brutal if you ask me, because normally you have more switching frequency than you can ever use. Now then, if having 32 phases and 60 amp power stages isn't already enough overkill for your 3770K quad core or the 2700K, which would arguably actually pull more power than the 3770K, because, one of them's built on 22 nanometer and the other is built on 32 nanometer. Bigger transistors are more brutal, that's right. And they also pull more power, and unless you're on liquid nitrogen, 32 nanometer actually clocks better. Isn't that great? Anyway, for a beast VRM like this, we of course gotta have not a single 8-pin, but double 8 pins, in case your 3770K somehow manages to pull 1,000 watts, which it'll never do, but hey, this board's gotta be pretty freaking overkill to be this damn brutal. So, that's the beastly V-Core VRM, and of course the stupid number of power connectors that Gigabyte opted to go with for this motherboard. Now, the CPU VTT rail down here, well, guess what power stage that is? Yep, more 60 amp power stages. I mean, at this point you might as well just use them for everything, which Gigabyte actually kind of went with. We'll get to that. But, memory, so we have our CPU VTT rail down here, and that rail is then converted by a linear regulator built up of this one MOSFET right here, which, this isn't very brutal in my opinion, but it certainly is more brutal than, I guess, using just a regular LDO. But anyway, so we do have this MOSFET over here, and that's used as a linear regulator to convert CPU VTT into whatever the hell IMC voltage is, because, quite frankly, well, I mean, it's IMC, the name gives it away. It's for the integrated memory controller, but, I quite frankly don't know what exactly that voltage achieves when you're overclocking. It probably affects your memory overclocking. I'm just not sure how much power it needs. Anyway, that's our IMC rail. And then also we have, of course, the iGPU somewhere up here, and that's some 3 phases. And that's all controlled, well, CPU VTT and the iGPU is all controlled by this controller right here. And why the hell is my brush orange? Who gave me this unmanly color? There we go, much better. So, yeah, that chip right there, and that's another high-end international rectifier controller, and stupid piece of software won't let me scroll around. That's a 3570A. And that goes up to 3+2 phases, also supports up to 2 megahertz switching frequency. Unfortunately, here you can't actually use it because, well, this goes 1 phase to 1 power stage. So you'd break the power stages if you maxed it out. But this also, of course, controls the iGPU. So that goes, somewhere up here with three PWM lines and sense lines and all that. Then you have the other 2 go over there. Now, quite frankly, this is kind of an odd design decision because, well, you're running PWM lines under the freaking memory traces, which, I mean, depending on how many boards of, layers of motherboard you have, probably not that much of an issue. But generally, you try to put your controller as close to the thing it's controlling, just so that you're not running potentially sensitive signal lines, because there's also the current sensing circuitry, so that you're not running all of that sensitive circuitry kind of ridiculous distances. But nonetheless, the Gigabyte opted for that, and for their troubles, they got a ton of extra phases because, quite frankly, there's no space anywhere on this side of the board. Really, if we zoom out, you can kind of see that this part of the design philosophy with this thing was no inch of PCB can be left unoccupied. And really, this is the only place where you don't see a whole bunch of more, componentry. Anyway, moving on from the CPU power and the iGPU power, honestly, the funny thing about the 3-phase iGPU power is that that's actually better than what you'd get on a lot of mid-range NVIDIA GPUs. If you go, actually, quite frankly, that's better than what you'd get on like a 1650 right now, like a GTX 1650. Yeah, there's bigger iGPU VRM on this than what you get on a full-blown GPU. Freaking ridiculous. Anyway, moving on to the memory VRM over here. Well, 3-phase iGPU power, 3-phase DDR3 power for only 4 DIMM slots. I mean, it doesn't get more overkill than this. And guess what those are? That's right, more 3550s. Almost said 3555. Far too easy. I'm too used to all the Asus boards using those. Anyway, so yeah, more 3550s. So 180 amps max current throughput for your memory power, because your freaking DDR3 memory sticks are totally gonna pull 100 watts of power. Not. But that's controlled by yet another IR3570. Like, on a lot of other boards, you might see something a bit more low cost, but now we gotta go for a full-blown 5-phase controller for this, just so we can control that rail as well. And then we got buttons. We got buttons for BCLK, raising and lowering the BCLK, for raising and lowering the core ratio. We got voltage read points, and proper voltage read points with actual probe hookups, instead of just dinky little solder bumps. You got those too if you feel like using solder bumps, but seriously, probe hookups are so much more convenient, and 100%, always. Because you can just plug the frickin' multimeter in and not have to hold the damn probes on the board. I don't know why so many high-end boards these days don't bother to go with these. Anyway, then we got our power button, an LN2 mode switch, because, jumpers are too fiddly. So yeah, I approve of that. Switches are for men. Because freaking messing around with jumpers, it can't, like tiny little dinky things. You'd lose the freaking clip for them. Stupid pile of garbage. Anyway, we also got a clear CMOS switch, which is, quite frankly, in the wrong damn place as far as I'm concerned. Because that's the power button. That's the clear CMOS. And then they decided to put the freaking reset switch down here. Like, what the hell is wrong with them? Why would you put the reset switch under the 4th PCIe slot when this board freaking supports 4-way GPU setups? That's why it has a PLX chip. Yes, that's right. This motherboard is so damn brutal that it'll take your 16 measly PCIe lanes from your CPU and convert them into 32 lanes so that you can both run 4-way Crossfire and 4-way SLI. SLI being the technology that actually has the stupid PCIe lane count requirement. You can run Crossfire off of 4444 if you feel like it. It doesn't really work that great, but it does. But it does at least run. Well, I guess at the time that this board was relevant, then 4x PCIe wouldn't necessarily bottleneck the GPUs that were available. Also, this being a Gigabyte board, it does have dual BIOS. And because it's high-end, this is one of the boards where you can actually control the dual BIOS instead of just having to sit there and, hope that the board doesn't randomly decide to go to the backup BIOS every time it has a little bit too much difficulty posting your memory settings. So here you got your BIOS selector, and then single BIOS and dual BIOS mode. And then for some reason, they decided to put the post code down here as well. Like, seriously, what is wrong with everybody? Like, you're going to be running 4-way GPUs. You're never going to see that freaking readout down there. Anyway, at least it's got the damn thing. Like, it's got the damn features. And quite frankly, this board is already pretty no, it could be more EATX, but I guess, at least it's present. I mean, there's a lot of boards that, that's unforgivable. That's quite frankly a disaster. Oh, awful. Especially for a 4-way board. Like, seriously, it's like one of the main features of this board is the freaking PLX chip. I'll cover up your postcodes. It's great user friendliness right there, of course. What else is there on this board? Oh, yeah, we should probably talk a bit about the memory topology that we got here. So if we go look at the back of the board, GIMP is being stupid again. Well, we've already covered everything on the back of the board. So there we go. That's what I wanted to show you. See this? This is a T. Do you know what that tells you? Oh, and we got another T down here, and a T over there, and a T over here, and another T down here, and there, and also here. And quite frankly, you get the idea. There's bloody T's everywhere. You know what that tells us about this board's memory trace layout? This uses a T topology, and I'm not going to write that out because, quite frankly, Buildzoid's better at writing than me. Because, you know, like, he's not brutal enough to not know how to write fast. Anyway, this is a T topology board, and you can clearly see the T's right there. And why did Gigabyte opt for T topology? Because when you want to run 4x4 or 4x8 or 4x2, like fully populate all your DIMM slots, this memory layout is better than, well, daisy chain. And, well, obviously, if they wanted a truly extreme overclocking board, then maybe they could have opted for just one DIMM slot per channel. But that's not brutal enough. We all know that more memory is better memory. So then, what else is pretty brutal about this board? Well, the heat sinks. See this? This is what we call a heat sink. Not that the board bloody needs it, considering how ridiculous overkill the VRM is, but we got fins, we got heat pipes, we even got a little heatsink for the PLX chip. Actually, this is probably the most useful part of this entire cooling system. Because, quite frankly, the PLX chip is the only part that's really going to get hot. The VRM certainly won't, considering they have to just power a puny little 3770K with all 32 of their phases. But you get, well, the PLX chip does actually get hot. Like, it has an 8-watt TDP, so they do sometimes overheat. So the little heatsink over here, useful for the PLX chip, and then massive overkill for the chipset again. Though admittedly, there's a heat pipe going to both of those, so probably the PLX chip's just kind of, like, this is basically just a heatsink for the PLX chip, because everything else under it doesn't actually produce that much heat. Okay, well, that covers the Gigabyte Z7... why isn't it working again? That covers the Gigabyte Z77X ultra powerful 7 motherboard, which is probably the most brutal motherboard and most, well, definitely the most overkill motherboard ever created. Thank you for watching this video. Wait, this is a bonus video for the patrons, so I don't even have to do the stupid promos. Ha! See y'all later. Goodbye.